Startup Nation, by Dan Senor and Saul Singer. Introduction. Imagine for a moment you're in a quiet, elegant hotel suite, high in the Swiss Alps. The air is thin, and so is the patience of the two men sitting in near silence. One is Shimon Peres, a world-famous statesman, a Nobel Prize winner, already in his 80s. The other is a brilliant young tech executive named Shai Agassiz, who is normally the most confident man in any room, but today, he's anxious. They are on a mission that feels almost impossible, to convince the world's biggest car companies to abandon gasoline and switch to electric cars. They've just been shot down by the CEO of a top automaker, who essentially told them their idea was a fantasy. Now, they're waiting for their last chance, a meeting with Carlos Ghosn, the legendary CEO of Renault and Nissan. This single moment, this high-stakes pitch in the Alps, is the perfect entry point into one of the most astonishing economic stories of our time. It's the story of how a tiny country, Israel, smaller than New Jersey, with a population smaller than New York City, and with no natural resources to speak of, became a global hub of innovation that rivals Silicon Valley. The book we're exploring today is Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle, written by Dan Senor and Saul Singer. This isn't just a book about business or technology. It's a deep dive into the very soul of a culture that thrives on adversity, questions everything, and has turned the art of the improbable into a national pastime. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the secrets behind this miracle. We're not just going to talk about statistics, though they are staggering: more companies on the NASDAQ than all of Europe, more venture capital per person than any country on Earth. No, we're going to uncover the human ingredients. We'll look at the cultural mindset, the unique military experience, and the historical pressures that created a nation of entrepreneurs. My promise to you is this: by the end of our time together, you won't just understand how Israel did it. You'll understand the timeless principles of innovation, resilience, and creative thinking that you can apply to your own life, no matter where you are or what you hope to build. So let's return to that hotel room in the Alps, and discover how a simple, audacious idea can change the world. Book summary. When Carlos Ghosn walked into the room, Shimon Peres didn't back down. After the last meeting, you'd expect him to be cautious. Instead, he leaned in and, with a quiet intensity, told Ghosn that oil was finished. Not just because it was running out, but because the world no longer wanted it. It was financing terror and instability. We don't need to defend against incoming rockets, Peres argued, if we can cut off the funding that launches them in the first place. Then, just as Peres was making his case, Ghosn stopped him. He said, "Mr. Peres, I read Shai's paper, and he is absolutely right. The future is electric. We have the car, and we think we have the battery." The relief in the room was immense. This was the moment Shai Agassiz's radical idea found its partner. Agassiz's vision was simple but brilliant. Electric cars seemed expensive because of the battery. But what if you didn't sell the battery with the car? What if you treated the battery like you treat gasoline, something you pay for as you go? Better yet, what if you created a network of stations where you could swap a dead battery for a fresh one in less time than it takes to fill a tank of gas? Suddenly, electric cars weren't just viable, they were cheaper and more convenient. Agassiz's new company, called Better Place, would operate like a cell phone provider. You'd sign up for a mileage plan and get a subsidized car. Better Place would own the batteries and the swap stations. And why start in Israel? Because its small size and its isolation, surrounded by hostile neighbors, made it a perfect, self-contained transportation island. What was once a strategic vulnerability was now, in Agassiz's eyes, the perfect laboratory for a world-changing idea. This story isn't just about one brilliant entrepreneur. It's a window into the Israeli psyche. It's about a national trait the authors call chutzpah. Now, you might have heard this word before, often with a negative meaning, like arrogance or nerve. But in Israel, it's something different. It's the courage to challenge authority, to question the status quo, to believe that you, personally, can find a better way. It's the default setting. We see this chutzpah again and again. Take the story of a small Israeli startup called Fraud Sciences. In the early 2000s, the president of PayPal, Scott Thompson, reluctantly agreed to a 20-minute meeting with its founder, Shwat Shaked. PayPal, the giant of online payments, had 2,000 people dedicated to fighting fraud. Shaked, a quiet young man, walked in and said his idea was simple: the world is divided into good people and bad people, and his company could tell the difference online. Thompson was almost insulted. It sounded ridiculously naive. "How do you do that?" he asked, ready to end the meeting. Shake's answer? Hunting down terrorists. He explained that in his elite Army intelligence unit, his job was to track terrorists through their online financial footprints. Good people leave traces online. Bad people try to hide. To test him, Thompson gave Shake 100,000 of PayPal's past transactions, with the personal data scrubbed to make it harder. He figured he wouldn't hear back for months. He got an email from Israel 3 days later. "We're done." Thompson and his team of PhDs were stunned. Shake's little company, with incomplete data, had been 17% more accurate than PayPal at identifying good customers that PayPal had mistakenly rejected. Thompson realized this wasn't just a new tool, it was a revolution. He knew PayPal couldn't just partner with them, they had to buy them. Immediately. They ended up paying $169 million for the 55-person company. What Scott Thompson experienced firsthand was not just a clever algorithm. It was a mindset forged in an environment where your ideas could have life or death consequences. As one of the investors in Fraud Sciences put it, when you've been developing technology to find terrorists, then finding thieves is pretty simple. This constant, almost insatiable questioning of authority is everywhere. It happened at Intel too. In the early 2000s, the entire computer industry was obsessed with one thing: clock speed. Faster was always better. But as chips got faster, they got hotter, creating what was known as the power wall. For laptops, this was a dead end. You couldn't fit a big enough fan inside to cool them down. A team of engineers at Intel's office in Haifa, Israel, saw this coming. They came up with a radical new chip architecture. Instead of just revving the engine faster, they designed it to work smarter, like a car with gears. The chip could run more slowly, stay cooler, but actually process software faster. They took their breakthrough to Intel headquarters in California, expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, they were met with resistance. The entire industry, including Wall Street, measured a chip's value by its clock speed. A slower running chip, even if it was more powerful, was a marketing nightmare. The head of the chip division tried to kill the project. But the Israeli team wouldn't let it go. They were relentless. They flew back and forth to California so often they seemed to be everywhere, cornering executives in hallways to argue their case. They knew the company was heading for a wall, and they refused to let it crash. Eventually, armed with overwhelming data and sheer persistence, they won. In 2003, Intel released the new chip, codenamed Banias after a spring in northern Israel. It was released as the Centrino chip for laptops. It was a runaway hit and became the anchor of Intel's growth for years to come. An analyst would later say that the Israeli team saved the company. So, a natural question arises: where does this culture of audacity, this chutzpah, this relentless drive to challenge and innovate, come from? The authors of Startup Nation point to one institution above all others: the Israel Defense Forces, or the IDF. For most people, the military brings to mind rigid hierarchies, strict obedience, and following orders without question. But the IDF is different. Because nearly everyone in Israel serves, its culture permeates the entire society. And that culture is surprisingly anti-hierarchical. Consider a moment from the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Israeli tank commanders were suddenly facing a new, terrifying weapon: the Sagar missile. It was a wire-guided missile that could be fired by a single soldier hiding in the desert, and it was destroying Israeli tanks from a distance. The soldiers on the ground had no doctrine, no training for this. They had to figure it out, in the heat of battle, while their comrades were dying. And they did. The tank crews realized the missile was guided by a soldier watching a small red light on its tail. So, on their own initiative, they developed a new tactic, right there on the battlefield. When a red light was spotted, every tank would start moving randomly and firing back in the general direction of the shooter. The dust they kicked up would obscure the shooter's view, and the return fire would disrupt his concentration. It worked. This tactic, invented by soldiers at the front, was later adopted by NATO. It was bottom-up innovation at its most critical. The soldiers didn't wait for orders from a general. They saw a problem, and they solved it. This is by design. The IDF is deliberately understaffed at senior levels. There are fewer generals and colonels to issue commands, which forces more responsibility and initiative down to the junior ranks. A 23-year-old company commander in the IDF might be responsible for the lives of 100 soldiers, millions of dollars in equipment, and making life-or-death decisions in a complex urban environment, all while journalists film from a nearby roof. As one commander put it, "Tell me how many 23-year-olds elsewhere in the world live with that kind of pressure." This experience transforms them. By the time they finish their service and go to university, they are not kids anymore. They are mature leaders, problem solvers who have been tested under the most intense pressure imaginable. This creates a national pool of talent that is uniquely prepared for the chaos and uncertainty of entrepreneurship. The phrase "it's not my fault" simply doesn't exist in this culture. The military also acts as the nation's great equalizer and its ultimate networking hub. A taxi driver might be the commander of a millionaire CEO in their reserve unit. People from every walk of life, new immigrants from Ethiopia and Russia, kids from wealthy suburbs and poor towns, are thrown together, forced to rely on each other. The bonds they form last a lifetime, creating a powerful social network where everyone is connected. As one Israeli entrepreneur says, the whole country is one degree of separation. This brings us to another key pillar of the startup nation: immigration. Israel is, fundamentally, a nation of immigrants. 9 out of 10 Jewish Israelis are either immigrants themselves or the children or grandchildren of immigrants. As one observer noted, immigrants are, by definition, risk-takers. They are not afraid to start over. A nation of immigrants is a nation of entrepreneurs. The most dramatic example of this was the wave of immigration from the former Soviet Union in the 1990s. In just a few years, nearly 1 million people arrived, increasing Israel's population by 20%. This would be like the United States absorbing 60 million people in a decade. And these weren't just any immigrants. A huge number were highly educated scientists, engineers, and doctors. Back in the Soviet Union, because of anti-Semitism, being the best in your field was a form of survival. This wave of human capital arrived just as the global tech boom was taking off and Israel's new venture capital industry was being born. It was an incredible collision of talent, timing, and opportunity. The new arrivals provided the engineering firepower that fueled the high-tech explosion. This constant influx of new people, new ideas, and a powerful sense of drive is woven into the country's DNA. But there's another, less obvious element to Israel's success: the ability to turn disadvantages into advantages. For its entire existence, Israel has been small, isolated, and under threat. But as we saw with Shai Agassi, this isolation can create a perfect laboratory. The same is true of its lack of natural resources. Israel is mostly desert. So what did it do? It became the world leader in water technology. The story of Netafim is a perfect example. Its founder, Simha Bloss, got the idea for drip irrigation from watching a single tree that was thriving, seemingly without water. He discovered it was being fed by a tiny, slow leak in an underground pipe. This led to the invention of a system that allows farmers to increase their crop yields by up to 50% while using 40% less water. An invention born of scarcity in the desert is now used all over the world. This same pattern repeated itself in geopolitics. For decades, the Arab League enforced a strict economic boycott against Israel. Major companies, especially car manufacturers like Toyota and Honda, refused to do business there. This forced Israeli entrepreneurs to leapfrog their own region. They couldn't sell to their neighbors, so they had to think globally from day one. And they focused on products that weren't subject to boycotts or high shipping costs: small components, software, and ideas. This positioned them perfectly for the knowledge-based economy of the future. Perhaps the most dramatic example of turning adversity into strength came in 1967. On the eve of the Six-Day War, Israel's closest ally and main arms supplier, France, suddenly imposed an arms embargo. President Charles de Gaulle, in a stunning act of betrayal, cut Israel off. This was Israel's Sputnik moment. The country's leaders realized they could never again be so dependent on another nation for their survival. They made a fateful decision. Israel had to build its own advanced weapons systems, its own fighter jets, its own tanks. It was an incredibly ambitious, almost impossible task for such a small country. The most ambitious project was the Lavi fighter jet. Though the project was eventually canceled after billions were spent, the effort had a profound, unintended consequence. It created a massive pool of world-class engineers with experience in the most advanced aerospace and electronic systems. When the program was shut down, these thousands of highly skilled engineers flooded into the private sector, unleashing a wave of technological talent that helped kickstart the high-tech boom. This is where another unique Israeli trait comes into play: the mashup. Because of the diverse experiences people get, moving from military to university to business, often in different fields, there's a natural tendency to combine disciplines in unexpected ways. A perfect example is Gabriel Idun. He was a rocket scientist who designed the electro-optical systems that allow missiles to see their targets. One day, he had an idea. What if he could miniaturize that missile technology and put it inside a pill? A pill with a camera that a patient could swallow, which would then transmit images from inside the digestive tract. Everyone told him it was impossible. But he persisted, and his company, Given Imaging, created the PillCam. Today, it's a revolutionary medical device used around the world. This is the Israeli mashup, combining missile guidance technology with gastroenterology. It's the kind of cross-disciplinary leap that happens when your fighter pilots are also art students, and your rocket scientists are thinking about medicine. Of course, all the culture, talent, and audacity in the world won't create a startup boom without one crucial ingredient: money. And in the early 1990s, Israel had virtually no venture capital industry. Foreign investors saw Israel as a place for conflict and archaeology, not high-return investments. This is where the government stepped in with one of the most brilliant and effective industrial policies in history. The program was called Yozma, which means initiative in Hebrew. The idea was simple. The government offered to co-invest with foreign venture capital firms. They said, in essence, if you create a venture fund to invest in Israeli startups, we'll give you a significant chunk of the money, sharing the risk with you. But here's the best part. If your fund is successful, you can buy us out for a cheap price. We take the risk, you get the reward. It was an offer no investor could refuse. Suddenly, the world's top VCs from the US and Europe flocked to Israel. But they didn't just bring money. They brought expertise. They taught a generation of young Israelis how to build companies, how to market products, how to think like global business leaders. Yozma created 10 new venture funds, and in just a few years, it had spawned a thriving, private, and self-sustaining venture capital industry. As one entrepreneur said, venture capital was the match that sparked the fire. The combination of all these elements, a culture of chutzpah, a military that acts as an incubator for leaders, a constant influx of ambitious immigrants, a knack for turning disadvantages into advantages, and a smart government catalyst, created the perfect storm for innovation. The book ends by contrasting Israel with a place like Dubai. Dubai tried to engineer a technology cluster from the top down. It built gleaming office parks, offered tax-free zones, and invited the world's biggest tech companies to set up sales offices. And it created a successful commercial hub. But it didn't create a culture of innovation. Why? Because the people who come to Dubai are mostly there to make money and then leave. There is no social glue, no shared sense of purpose or community. It lacks what the authors, quoting the historian Barbara Tuchman, call a motive. Israel, for all its problems, has always had a motive, the drive to build and secure a home for a people. And this sense of purpose, this idea that you are not just building a company but also building a country, provides a powerful, intangible fuel. Today's Israeli entrepreneurs, the authors say, see themselves as farmers of high tech. They are carrying on the pioneering spirit of the country's founders, but their fields are made of silicon, and their crops are ideas. They still have that sense that they are part of something larger than themselves. It's a powerful combination, the restless dissatisfaction that is always looking for a better way, fused with a deep-seated commitment to teamwork and a shared mission. It's the engine that powers the startup nation. Commentary. As we close the pages of Startup Nation, it's easy to be struck by the sheer number of incredible stories and statistics. But I think the real power of this book, especially for someone your age, isn't in the what, but in the why. It's a book about a national mindset, and mindsets are things we can all learn from. The first, and perhaps most important lesson is about our relationship with adversity. The story of Israel is a masterclass in turning obstacles into opportunities. A desert with no water? Let's invent technology that changes agriculture for the entire planet. Surrounded by enemies and cut off from regional markets? Let's become world leaders in industries that don't need shipping lanes, like software and cybersecurity. Betrayed by our closest ally? Let's build our own defense industry, which will accidentally seed our entire high-tech economy. There is a profound lesson here. We are so often taught to see constraints as limitations, as things that stop us. This book flips that idea on its head. It suggests that constraints are often the very things that force us to be creative. Scarcity breeds ingenuity. Pressure forges diamonds. When you don't have all the resources in the world, you have to be smarter, faster, and more innovative. So the next time you face a limitation, whether it's a lack of money, time, or support, ask yourself the Israeli question: how can this disadvantage become my greatest advantage? The second powerful idea is the concept of chutzpah as a creative force. In many cultures, we are taught to respect hierarchy, to wait our turn, to not challenge our elders or our bosses. This book argues that innovation doesn't work that way. Breakthroughs happen when someone has the courage to say, "I think there's a better way," even if they're the most junior person in the room. This isn't about being rude or disrespectful. It's about a culture where ideas are judged on their merit, not on the rank of the person who proposes them. It's about creating an environment where healthy debate and constructive disagreement are seen as essential for progress. For you, as you start your journey in school or your career, this is a powerful tool. Learn to question things respectfully. Learn to argue your case with passion and data. Don't be afraid to have an opinion, and don't be afraid to be wrong. The most valuable people in any organization are not the ones who just follow orders, but the ones who think for themselves. Finally, the book highlights the incredible power of a mission-driven life. From the early pioneers draining swamps to the modern entrepreneurs building global companies, there's a sense that their work is about more than just personal gain. It's about contributing to something larger than themselves. This motive, as the book calls it, is a source of incredible resilience and drive. When you have a purpose that's bigger than your own comfort or success, you find the strength to persevere through the inevitable setbacks. The work becomes more meaningful, and that meaning becomes a powerful fuel. So as you think about what you want to do with your life, don't just ask, "What do I want to be?" Ask, "What problem do I want to solve? What mission do I want to be a part of?" To put these ideas into practice today, you could try this. First, identify one constraint in your life right now. Instead of seeing it as a negative, spend 10 minutes brainstorming 3 ways it could actually be a hidden advantage. Second, the next time you're in a class or a group and you disagree with something, find a respectful but confident way to voice your perspective. Practice having a better argument, not just winning one. It's a powerful combination of ideas that doesn't just explain the success of one small country. It provides a blueprint for a more resilient, creative, and purposeful way of thinking for all of us. That was a look into Startup Nation by Dan Senor and Saul Singer. We've journeyed through its core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only be a map. The real treasure is found when you explore the territory yourself. The true magic of a book like this happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is a signpost, meant to help you decide if this is a path worth walking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or resonated with your ambition, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely shift the way you see challenges and opportunities in your own life. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.